Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
Hey everyone, welcome to Sports Spectrum. I am Jason Romano. Today's show is brought to you by Water Mission, one of our newest sponsors and partners here at Sports Spectrum. They are a nonprofit Christian engineering ministry that fights the global water crisis with safe water, sanitation, and hygiene solutions in developing countries and disaster areas. The organization has served more than 5 million people in 56 countries. Check out their website, watermission.org, to pray with them and to learn more about the great work they're doing, watermission.org. We're also presented today by Compassion International. They are the most trusted child development ministry in the world. Every child that is sponsored through the Compassion program is discipled in the Word of God. Over 150,000 children choosing to follow Jesus in the last year alone. To learn more about how you can help release a child from poverty, check out the website compassion.com/sportsspectrum, compassion.com/sportsspectrum, and pray about sponsoring a child today. Really excited about the conversation we're going to bring to you today on the show with Dior Ginyard. Dior works with the NFL's Player Association, and he is a senior player manager there. And part of his job is to connect players to programs and facilitate professional development away from the field. So he's involved with a lot of NFL players' journeys post-NFL career, and even while they're still playing, figuring out what else they want to do when the roaring of the crowd stops and they're done being an NFL player. But this is more about Dior's journey to Jesus, and it's a powerful story of redemption. Now, Dior and I met about 6 months ago or so through social media. Maybe it was a year ago, connected a little bit. And then when I was down in Miami, when John Ackerman and I, my colleague at Sports Spectrum, were down in Miami back in January for the Super Bowl and covering the week of the Super Bowl. We had a ton of content from there. One of the interviews that we actually taped down there in person was an interview with Dior Ginyard. And it was about 12 or 13 minutes long. It was a great interview, but he crammed his whole life story into 12 minutes. And I thought, why not get him back? Let's talk about how the coronavirus outbreak and things like that have affected his job and certainly the role that he's doing with the NFLPA. But let's go a little bit deeper into Dior's journey to Jesus. And man, does he have a story. I'm talking about a story of an injury in football. I'm talking about health scare, potential death sentence for this guy, coming out of that and then getting caught up in some really bad things and ending up in jail, and God redeeming him in a powerful way. I'm smiling as I say it because it's such an awesome story. So let's get to it. He is Dior Ginyard, NFLPA's senior player manager, and he joins us here today on Sports Spectrum. Dior, welcome to Sports Spectrum.
Thanks for having me, Jason. Glad to be back on.
It's funny you say glad to be back, so it's time to be a little transparent, and I'll probably say this in the introduction too. But Dior and I met at the Super Bowl in Miami, and I was really impressed with kind of the relationship that we had developed over social media and wanted to have him tape an interview with us in the podcast. So he came over, and I'm starting to feel bad now, Dior, that I had to come all the way over to the Radio Row set in Miami, and we taped an interview, and it was fantastic, but it was only about 12, 13 minutes long. You had a meeting to go to, some other circumstances, and then everything changed with the pandemic and the coronavirus. And, you know, the sooner out we got, I said to him, can you come back on? We'll talk a little bit about what's happening with the coronavirus, how it's affecting your job and what you do with the NFLPA. And then let's get deeper into your story and hear you tell the longer version of it. So, yeah. We're here. We're doing this thing again. That's okay. I kind of know your story now. It actually helps facilitate me with the questions. But how is your role right now? I'm assuming you're working from home like all of us are with the NFLPA and the pandemic and the coronavirus. We're taping this in early spring. How has this affected you personally?
Well, one, I try to have this background so no one knows if I'm working from home or not. But it's been
That's fair. That's fair.
It's been different though, man. You know, it's so I work in that player development space and service, and I work on behalf of our current players and just servicing them
Yeah.
And this is unique times where, this is the fire drill we talked about when players aren't playing, right? And it's like they have a ton of downtime. So what do you do with that time? And so that's where my role comes into play, because I oversee a lot of our professional development resources, continuing education resources, and making sure guys are tapped into what they want to do off the field. And so what better time to focus on that than now, right? And so what I've been charged with really is just thinking about ways we can reach guys virtually. Like, what are those underutilized but relevant resources to right now, whether it's online modules or virtual webinars. And so it's really like a case study for us, honestly, because, does working with players from a visual perspective and digital perspective work? And I know sometimes we rely on in-person touches because that's the easiest thing to do. We can always say that works the best, but let's see if that works. Like, now we're forced to think from a digital perspective. And so it's been fun to kind of do a deep dive on a lot of our resources and say, hey, can we turn this into a virtual webinar? Or, hey, can we conduct this, not in person, but through Zoom and through all the other, apps and resources that they have out there. So interesting times, and it's forcing me to stretch, it's forcing me to grow, though, too. And I think at the end of this, we'll come out a little bit better than where we started.
Go a little deeper in terms of the exact role that you have. I remember when you told us on the original interview, you had like 3 parts to your job, especially that week at the Super Bowl. Can you share a little bit deeper about what those kind of different roles entail?
Yep, threefold, 3 heads. So one, I oversee it, as I mentioned, our player development programs and resources. So think about that from a career development perspective and also a continuing education perspective. So under that career development pillar, it's really, providing exploratory opportunities for current players. You got half of the guys, we'll split down the middle. Half of the guys know what they want to do. And so our role is to help them build on that, gain the experience, meet the people. So by the time your career is over, you can you have some cachet and you can dive right into a career. Then you get another half a set of players who don't know what their and is or what else they want to do outside of football. Well, that's exploratory, right? Let's get you some job shadowing experiences. Let's get you talking to some people. Let's get your foundational stuff done with a resume and LinkedIn and things of that nature. And we have resources in place to facilitate that. We have internship program. We just wrapped up our NFLPA externship. So our 7th year doing that program. We had 70 players interning across 30 plus different companies for the past 3 weeks.
That's great.
We work with a career service provider that called AFLife. They facilitate our one-on-one sessions with players. We're rolling out a job shadow program that's really in person, and that's more short-term boot camp. We're rolling out informational interviews. So now we have senior level executives, all of these companies that are willing to talk to players for 30 minutes to an hour, just so players can gauge some interest into, different industries. And so that's our career development pillar and overseeing that. And then from a continuing education perspective, just really encouraging current players to go back and get that degree. Some of our guys have graduated, and not graduated, but went to school, went to the pros their junior year. So they have 1 year left to finish. And so my role is encouraging them to finish. At any point, if they need a second job, they'll need a bachelor's degree, no matter what it's in. That's like a baseline need. So from undergraduate level, that, and then from a graduate level, encouraging guys to pursue MBAs, pursue masters, pursue trade schools now, whether it's, you want to be a barber, a contractor, start thinking about the things you can do now, whether it's courses now, courses during the summer, courses here and there. So we have relationships, and our partnerships are with Kelly School of Business. So we offer a lot through them, including MBA and online resources. Yeah. And then we just started a partnership with Penn State's World Campus for our guys that want to finish undergrad and take on different webinars and things of that nature. And so really growing in that continuing education space as well. And so that actually kind of sums up my first role, and it's the good dovetail into my second role, which is overseeing our rookie onboarding program. We started this 3.5 years ago, and really the focus of this is, looking at the average career span of an NFL player, it's 3.5 years. Are we putting them in the best position to succeed? And that's making sure they know about the resources, right? And so with this rookie onboarding program, the best way to explain it is it's a HR onboarding for the first 12 months, right? Yeah. And so right when they get drafted, there's an onboarding process to the end of their first regular season. They walk away with an action plan. And this action plan is really goals that they've self-selected for themselves off the field. And so maybe on the action plan, they'll have, finish their undergraduate degree. That's the goal. Well, over the next 3 years, myself and the 2 other player managers that we have in this role will work with that guy to make sure that they're staying on top of their goals. They know the resources that are available. And so it's really like a self-selected goals, and now you can have ownership over your development off the field. And our job really is to facilitate reminders and make them aware of the resources they have to make good on those goals. And so that's just the cut across the field version of rookie snowboarding program. We've seen a ton of success with it as it's grown over the past 3 years. First of its kind type of program in all of the sports unions. We look at like our player leadership and how many of our top quarterbacks, our young quarterbacks, are becoming player reps. We look at a leadership summit event that we host every year and how 60% of those guys were rookies. And so what we're noticing is a shift, right? Like a lot more younger guys are taking advantage of the resources. And so that's probably the second part of my job. And the last part is just overall player engagement. Yeah. I've been at the Player Association for close to 6 years now, and I have a good grasp on what we offer. The organization knows how passionate I am about working on behalf of players. That's what we stand for as a union. And so my job is just to engage and make sure they know what we offer them as a union, make sure they're aware of the resources. Any chance I can get, I'm going to player camps. I'm supporting guys at volunteer works that they're doing and charity events. I'm meeting them at Super Bowl, like I mentioned, and just, I have a passion and affinity for working on behalf of these guys. And so the third part of my job is just overall player engagement.
Quick break to tell you about Compassion International, the most trusted child development ministry in the world. $38 a month, tax deductible, an opportunity. Think about this when I say these words, an opportunity to release a child from poverty. That's what it's about with Compassion International. You need to go to their website and check out all the great work that they are doing with these children. It's really phenomenal. And when I say releasing a child from poverty, we're talking about food, education, medical care, vocational training, all of it being done in Jesus' name. Check out their website, compassion.com/sports spectrum, compassion.com/sports spectrum. Over 2 million children around the world are being released from poverty because of people like you and I sponsoring a child through Compassion. Go to that website, compassion.com/sports spectrum, and pray about sponsoring a child today. We're also presented today by Water Mission, one of our newer partners here at Sports Spectrum and sponsoring this show. We love what Water Mission is about, building safe water solutions that break through the global water crisis. Think about what they're doing. They were born out of a need for safe water following Hurricane Mitch in 1998, and since then has provided relief following some of the world's most devastating disasters. And Water Mission, their teams are first responders. When disasters occur, Water Mission can have water treatment systems on the ground and operational within 48 hours. In addition to being on the front line of emergency response efforts, Water Mission provides its technology, expertise, and solutions to other relief agencies worldwide. Man, they do such great work. We're so glad to have them as partners fighting the global water crisis. Check out watermission.org, watermission.org to learn more and to pray for them and to learn about the great work that they're doing fighting the global water crisis. Now back to our conversation with Dior Ginyard, joining us here on Sports Spectrum. Take us back to the early days, just growing up, where you grew up, faith, sports, all of that, because your story is a fantastic one.
Yeah, it's funny because when I get the opportunity to talk about it, I realize how deep it goes. But so grew up right in Prince George's County, Maryland, right outside of Washington, D.C. I had this, I don't want to say stereotypical goal, but I wanted to play professional football. I was a diehard and still am a diehard Washington Redskins fan. Yep. I thought that at this age,
you know who I root for, by the way, right?
Who's your guy?
I'm a Cowboys guy. So
I've seen that. I've seen you tweet about that, man.
Forgive me, brother. Forgive me.
No, it's fine, man. Look, I work on behalf of all the players. That's always my answer.
There you go. And I love all the players that come on our show, so we're good.
Right. So right now I'm supposed to be playing safety for the Redskins. I'm not supposed to be on this show, but that didn't work out too well. I didn't have the skill set, but I did try to make it. So I ended up graduating from high school. Got a small D3 scholarship to a school in Frostburg, Maryland, Frostburg State University. Couldn't play my first year because I had an injury that I was recovering from. The school was a little different. I was just in a weird space at that time because I was homesick and things like that. And then I was feeling, prideful because I wasn't playing football. And so that's why I went to that school. And so this was December 3rd, 2006. And me and my teammates decided to play a game of tackle football on the field. Tackle football, no equipment. And so me playing too aggressive to prove that I should be playing, I'm still good. And so I go out there and I'm playing like at 150. And so I went in to make a tackle on one of my teammates, and from what I was told, it sounded like a car crash. And so I was knocked unconscious. When I woke up, there was a helicopter on the field. I heard a ton of noise. My vision was blurry, couldn't walk. And I seen these people with these big headphones running towards me, and they're like, put me on a stretcher, and I'm crying. And then we get in the air, and we're flying to a hospital, Cumberland, Maryland, and they're asking me like what today is, and I couldn't remember the date. And then I slipped into a coma. And so get to the hospital, I wake up, and they do not brain surgery. They did a CAT scan, and they saw that my skull was fractured. And when my skull fractured, the pieces pierced my brain, and my brain was swelling up. So I was slowly going brain dead. So emergency brain surgery was performed. I woke up, and my mom, brother, and sister was by my bed. And at that moment, could no longer play football. Life changed, 20 screws in my head. And just at 18, I'm like, okay, where do I go? Because the area I grew up with, like that's what I thought was the way out. And so recovered from that, it took me a couple of weeks in the hospital, and I tried to rush back, and my recovery was bad. So I got diagnosed with chronic PTSD when I left out of the hospital.
Yeah.
So I dealt with suicidal thoughts, the depression, the anger. Didn't really have a good relationship with my dad at the time. Wasn't talking to him. Well, didn't talk to him. Didn't really know him that much. And so just not knowing what to do with a lot of those emotions that I had. And so I got into a lot of trouble because of that, though. Deep, dark places. Between 18 and 21, I was, found myself, locked up and in jail 3 separate times. And not that I was a bad kid. I never got charged with anything, but it was more so just lost and not really knowing to do a lot of the anger and emotions that I had. Yeah.
Dior, how long ago is this?
That was December 3rd, 2006 when the incident happened. It took me, man, the recovery was about 3 years, man. That first year was brutal, right? Right away, I transferred to Bowie State. So I had the injury happen December 3rd, 2006. I was in class at Bowie State in February.
Wow.
And it just wasn't a smart idea. Like, I think my first semester there, I had like a 0.76. Like I just couldn't concentrate. My memory was bad. Then I had these emotional problems that none of my friends knew about. Felt like I was dying inside, to be honest with you. And still dealing with ramifications from my injury. And so that went on for about a year and a half. And I remember I was on campus, and I got really close to my advisor. And I remember Professor Karima Haynes at Bowie State. And I remember one day I just went in her office, and I just like burst into tears. I'm just lost. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. And she reminded me, like, she loved the way I communicated and like my writing. And I was like, well, I've always been a writer. Like, even when I was dealing with a lot of the injuries that I had, I was, the way that I coped was writing. And she was like, you change your major to communications and public relations. I know you're passionate about sports. Let's see if there are jobs out there. And so I ended up landing an internship with a PR company that represented a football player at the time. He played for the Saints. His name is Osama Young. Actually, he works at the NFL league office now.
Yeah, I remember Osama.
That's my first job in sports, and worked on his behalf, pushing papers, honestly, but just I felt re-energized because I was still involved in sports. So then I ended up landing my second internship in event operations with the Redskins. Totally knew I didn't want to get into events, but my goal was really to gain exposure and to make connections. And so that flew by. I ended up graduating from Bowie State in 2011. Before that, I think leading up to that graduation date, randomly I went to Bible study with one of my friends. He knew I was dealing with some issues. I started to open up. I think the date was like November 17th, 2011. It was a Tuesday. It was that second Tuesday in November.
I love that you remember that. That's
I do.
Awesome. Yeah,
I do, man. Second Tuesday in November, and sitting in the back of Bible study. And I mean, this flush of emotion just came over me. And I walked up there to turn my life over to Christ, actually get saved. And I remember I walked back to the usher room, and like, I'm like bawling. And so that's really where my relationship, started. And I'll back up a little bit further than that though. So
yeah, this was
in 2011 too, leading up to this was probably in the summertime. I got locked up for the third time. Something I didn't do. One of my friends got into a fight, and he left me, and I'm standing there with a whole bunch of guys. I'm like, oh God, I have this head injury. I'm like, I can't. So long story short, they knew that they knew the issue that went on or whatever. So I ended up, turning myself in, and charges were dropped and everything. I want to put that disclaimer, but I laid in that cell, and I remember my mom had to go with me to turn myself in, and she like dropped her head when they walked me back there. Like, my mom was a single mom. She had her own battles with her addictions and demons and things like that I saw. We had our apartment burned down when I was in the 5th grade. And so she was just an incredible woman to deal with all of this as a single mom and still be able to, I really saw that she was hurting. So I sat in that cell and I'm like, look, I got two decisions to make at this point. I was like, either one, everyone would understand if my life went the other way. Like, brain injury, no dad, criminal record, black man. Like, yeah, if you turn out standing in front of a liquor store for the rest of your life, people will be like, yeah, I know why, because he went through X, Y, and Z. I was like, or I can look at like the sacrifices that my mom made and, the fact that I'm still here and the people that had brain surgery or were in a coma aren't. And I was like, or I can put this chip on my shoulder, understand all the variables that make up my life, but use that as a motivation. And I remember I got out of that holding cell and I turned off all my social media. My mom gave me this book called Purpose Driven Life by Rick Warren. And this is a book that she read when she was in rehab. And so it had her highlights and markups. And so I sat there and I read it on my twin bed in Beltsville, Maryland. I would read a chapter a day, then I would write in my notepad. And then I lived across the street from my old high school. So I would run in the rain and I'd run around the track and I'm like praying to God. I don't even know at this time, I don't even remember what I'm saying. And then I just started getting better, man. That book changed my life, saved me. It honestly saved me because I was in a dark place. And so it really just helped me realize that, my calling and my purpose in this life. Right. And so fast forward, when I started getting my life back together, I started doing a lot of community service work because I'm like, my passion is in giving back and serving others. And I know what I've been through. And I know that there's a kid out there that needs me, because I don't have the stereotypical, 4.0 and big school and, great upbringing. I'm not knocking that at all. I would have loved that at the time, right? But I knew my story was different, but I knew that I made it through. So I was I wanted to be that beacon of hope for somebody that dealt with the same thing I did. And so graduated from my undergrad degree. And then didn't want to jump right into sports yet because I'm like, look, I need to make money and I'm not starting ticket sales. Like, you're not going to sell me on working ticket sales and work your way up. So, man, luckily I got my first job at Lockheed Martin, which also changed my life. And this is God played such an amazing role in that process as well because I was not qualified for the position at all. I was a communications major that couldn't write, but I remember sitting in that waiting room and I remember just so discouraged because people in there, three of us, they looked sharp. I mean, their suits were nice. And the young lady had her heels. Everything was done. I had this big old suit and I had this 2.7 GPA. And I'm like, and this company that's like the most powerful company in the world. I'm like, what am I doing? I was like, you know what? When I go in there, I'm just be transparent and tell my story. Yeah. And I went and I said, hey, look, on paper, I may not be like the best fit, but I'll be the hardest working person in that room that's waiting in this waiting room right now. And I was like, I need this opportunity. If I don't have the answer, I'll find it. And I remember I said that at the end. And I told them about my head injury and things, and they hired me. It was Rob Fuller in Lockheed Martin. I still stay in touch with him to this day because he took a chance on me, honestly. And didn't look like me, didn't have the same upbringing, but he saw something in me. And so I started at Lockheed Martin as my first job. First, it was a full-time internship, so 40 hours a week. I started my master's program at UMUC in management marketing, and I also landed an internship with the Wizards in marketing and promotions. Was terrible at writing, so it got better. They brought me on full time, stayed with them for 2.5 years, earned my master's, and still was diving in, doing these sports internships here and there and staying involved. And so 2.5 years came. I was ready to move on and looking at sports. And it's just crazy. I wanted to stay in DC. So I click on NFLPA. First of all, I'm like, what is this? I thought it's not the NFL. But they were local. So I'm like, let me take a chance. I click on the career page and there's one job opening. And it said player development manager. And I'm like, okay, this sounds interesting. And then the first sentence it said, in this position, you'll help current NFL players prepare for life after football. And I'm like, wow, help NFL players prepare for life after football. Life after football that I dealt with, and not at the professional level, but it was taken away from me out of nowhere. Sure. Dealt with all the bad. And looking where I'm at now, right? I'm a walking, testimony. And so I was like, you know what? I'll apply. I applied and I wrote the hiring manager on LinkedIn. And she was like, hey, look, it's a tough sledding. 300 people apply, a lot of former players, a lot of internal people. But she gave me a call and I walked her through my story. And I was like, hey, look, this is my story. This is what I'm passionate about, helping people. I dealt with transition hard. They brought me in person and I told my story and I told her some of the things I worked on at Lockheed Martin and they hired me. And it was like, I still have the letter that they sent me. I still have the email that they sent me. Because how long ago was that? That was in 2015 because I've been there 5.5 years at the Players Association. Okay. 25 years old working in sports. And it all came full circle. Well, I thought it did at that time. I'm like, wow, here I had this dream of playing in the NFL taken away from me. Not that I asked for it taken away, but just a freak accident. Dealt with depression, suicidal thoughts, figured my life back out. And now this job where I'm helping players deal with that. And so I just remember praying on my knees, man. I was so emotional just because, God is good. Like, I know that my resume was put at the top of the pile because of him. Like, I know it wasn't me. And it was apparent. Like, even the job description, I look back at it now because I saved that too. And it was like 5 years of teaching experience. I'm like, okay. Yeah. And I still took it. I still applied. But they took a chance on me too. And it's been an amazing ride ever since. I absolutely love the work that I do. I love the organization I work for. And then my role just evolved into what I talked about earlier. And my faith has played a huge part in that. And that's why now I'm so passionate about just giving back. Like, that's kind of like where I'm headed with my career. I love my job. I love what I do. But my focus really is to, how do I get back to that next generation of kids that are coming up that may be struggling like I did.
Well, the first way you're giving back is just telling your story. And that's really important. And I think a lot of people listening, I tell people my story, and I sometimes think, well, who am I? And maybe you do too. Like, I'm just some dude who did this and went through there. And, I tell a lot of times I tell the story of my alcoholic father who wasn't there for me. And then I'm like, well, I'm not the only one that's ever been through this. Yes. There's a million guys out there. You even said it, like, that have had issues, with their dad or whatever. But yeah, I still always say to people, please tell your story, because if it can help one person, it's important and it can make a difference. And then listen, we look at the model of Jesus. He said, I came not to be served, but to serve and give my life as a ransom for many. So we're talking about the Savior of the world saying that I came to serve. And so part of that serving is for us to tell our story, and then for us to get dirty and get in the mix and the grind of people's lives and help them right where they're at. So tell me about that for you, Dior, as you move towards a place where, you have this, I don't want to call it rags to riches story, because that's not really the fair word, but it is partially that, I think, of going from a place where you weren't even sure if you were going to live to fulfilling in many ways a dream with the NFLPA. But the importance of sharing your story, and I'm not just talking about your whole story, which is a great one, but I'm talking about the faith component of it and leaving that in and not taking that out. Can you share a little bit more about that?
That's a huge, I feel like I would be in a disservice to the person in the body of Christ that I'm here because of him. And if people can talk about the fraternities that they're in and the teams they love and the things that they quote unquote worship, then I can talk about mine as well. And I'm super transparent. Like, one, I just own my story. Like, I'm not afraid to be transparent because I know that there's somebody listening that needs to hear it.
Yeah.
And I know the place that it's coming from, and I know the role and the impact that faith and my faith in Jesus and his grace and mercy. That's the only reason that I'm here. If I could have been taken out a long time ago if it wasn't for his grace and mercy. I know that because there are mistakes that I make and that I will continue to make because I'm not perfect. But I think that needs to be said, because I think it's easy, especially I noticed this when the awards start coming in and the honors, like the Forbes 30 and the 30. I think it's easy at those moments to think that I pull myself up by my own bootstraps.
Yeah.
But I had to take a step back and realize, like, no, like this. I go back to that book that I read on my twin bed. Like, it's purpose-driven life. What's my purpose? What's my calling? Yeah, the accolades will come, the positions will come, but what am I in this position for? Right. And it's funny because people do talk to me about, like, you're very transparent. And I say, like, and my passion and, giving back to this next generation comes from, if I don't do it, I feel like I'll lose it all.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like the reason that I made it through the head injury, not having a dad, my mom being on drugs, my apartment burning down, being arrested, like, the reason I got through those things and that I'm here today is because of my relationship with Christ and the fact that I'm walking testimony of his. So if I stop it, then I'll lose it. And I think it's important for me to do it at the platform that I have. Like, I know now because it's weird, man, the position I'm in, because one, I have influence with the players. They see me as a resource. Two, I have influence with the sports industry community. They see somebody young who made Forbes, who's African-American male, who they, people aspire to be. And on the third part, I have people back home who may be struggling, who may not have a dad. And so I see the influence that I have and the platform I have. And I think because I have that, then it's important for me to tell all components of it. Right.
I was going to say, I'm holding The Purpose Driven Life. So I have this book. It was the first Christian book I ever got way back. I don't want to say when, but probably 2002. My wife got it from 2003. And it's marked up in here. But the very first words in chapter 1 that Rick Warren writes is, it's not about you. It's not about you. And so that's what I hear when you're saying this. This is not about me. All that I've accomplished, all that I've been able to go towards, it's not about me. It's about him. There's a parallel there with a lot of NFL players. We work with a lot of professional athletes and NFL guys in the ministry that own Sports Spectrum. And I'm around a lot of guys who struggle with identity, struggle with temptation, struggle with all of these things, just the pull of the world, being patted on your back and being told, you're awesome, you're great, you're awesome, you're wonderful. And yet it's not about you. So do you have those parallels that are not only in your life, but be able to kind of influence and talk to these players that you work with and remind them as much as you love them and it is about them, but it's really not about them?
Much love. And I do, because I was there too. And now that's why I give the example of, when I made that Forbes list, there was a time in my life where I look back now where I'm like, this is getting to my head. Like, and it's hard, right? And it's being fully transparent. It's hard when,
of course,
you finally feel like the chip is off your shoulder and it's like, wow, like people are praising me, and you can get lost in that so fast. But that's why I think it's important, one, to stay connected to people who are faith-based, who can speak truth to you, who you have a relationship with, the small groups. And it's funny, I'm sharing this story. There's one colleague that I work with that actually reports to me. And if you ever see that, Connor Ford, he always talks about how I've helped him, navigate his career. And, if it wasn't for you, man, I wouldn't even think. He's changed my life tremendously. Like we used to have Bible studies before, work. And he's always asking me about where I'm at in my faith and church and my family. And he's the one that I think keeps me grounded. And I think it's important to stay close to people like that. And so, I try to be that with some of the players that I have those deep relationships with, because it can be hard, from a religious standpoint, but more so from an influence standpoint.
Of course.
Like,
yeah.
These guys have influence. Like, what do you want to be known for? What do you want your legacy to be? Because at the end of the day, somebody else is going to wear the number for most of the guys. Yep. The name on the back of jersey is going to, that's not going to last longer. What you do after the sport you play is going to last a lot longer than what you do while you're playing. What do you want your legacy to be? What do you stand for? What are you passionate about? What role does Christ play in your life? And that's why I'm so grateful for guys like Benjamin Watson and Elvin Beacham. I was at our board of player rep meeting in chapel and just being in there and just engaging with those guys around this, and then to recognize that we're all not perfect either, and solace in that has been great. So I think it's important for me to share my story where I can, whether it's, through episodes like this or just in person with my guys. It's important for me to just be fully transparent.
I love it. As we wind down here, I want to ask you one more question. We ask it to all of our guests here. Really fascinated to see what your answer is. What are you learning from God right now? What's the Lord showing you? What's he teaching you? Where's he got you right now in your relationship with him? What are you learning from him?
That's good, man. It's funny. So my life has slowed down now a lot because I travel a ton, and I needed this though. Like, it's funny because I'm seeing people, I'm stuck in the house. I need to be in the house. And it's kept me grounded to think, like, it's so easy to get out of the side of the fact that not making Christ the root of what you do. And I think it was hard for me to do that when I'm traveling and going from city to city, and I'm Super Bowls and it's fun. You go to Pro Bowl and it's fun.
Of course. But
then I started realizing, okay, I haven't spent time in my devotional, or I'm not praying as much, and those little habits go away. But then you look up and it's like, I wonder why I'm so stressed, or I wonder why, I'm so exhausted. And it's because, and I really truly believe it's not the work that I'm doing, because I don't have Christ in the center of it. And so to be able to get up every morning at 6:00 and sit in this chair that I have by my window and listen to Stephen Furtick and get a coffee, it keeps me grounded. And I'll share something else personal that, so a lot of people that I'm, really close with don't know. So there was a time early last year where I was stressed, man, stressed with work, taking on a lot, I'm passionate about what I do, but it also could be, it's a gift and a curse. And I hit a wall, honestly, from a mental health perspective. A lot of, my head injuries, things start coming back. And so I'm like, all right, am I feeling weird and getting anxious and panic attacks because of my head injury, or is it because I'm stressed? And one day I just hit a wall and I had to get help, and I seeked help. I reached out to a mental health facility and spent a couple days with them. This was back in October. No one knew, I could still operate at a high level. And it's funny. So when I went in there, I'm the most clean cut person in there. And this is getting super transparent with you, most clean cut person in there. And I'm looking around like, wow, how did somebody that, is at the top of his profession so broken down that he's in the mental health facility? Because it doesn't matter what you look like, right?
Yeah.
And then I sat there, and I remember the first day I was there, I fasted, right? I didn't eat, and I just prayed. And I remember it made me realize that was October. A few months from that, I had prayed one morning and I was like, God, reconnect me with you. Any way you can, just do it. Like, I don't care how you do it. And I'm like, I asked for this. I asked him any way he needed to bring him back to me, bring it, do it. And so when I got it out of there, it wasn't the medication that helped me deal with my anxiety. It was prayer. Like, and I noticed that the more that I prayed, I got better with dealing with my anxiety. And I'm like, so it's people, I had my girlfriend who's asked me, like, how do you feel? You feel better? And I'm like, I feel better when I pray. Right. And it's like that. I asked God for this. She's like, are you glad you went through all this? I'm like, heck yeah. Before it's on the front end, I'm like, what am I dealing with? Why me? Now I'm like, let it happen again, because it brought her closer to me. So I think to put a bow tie on that is just, God is teaching me, man, to be humble. Keep him at the center of everything you do, and you'll be fine. The mistakes will come and all that stuff, but it's important to keep him at the center and the root. And that's done daily.
Yeah, that's such great encouragement there. Dior Ginyard, NFLPA senior player manager. Thanks for sharing your story, man. We could go another hour with all this, but we'll table it now and get you back for part 2 at some point. But thanks so much for being here and for joining us and for being an encouragement, not only to all the people listening, but for me personally. Thanks so much.
No, and honestly, just thank you. You provide the platform to do this, and it's been so helpful. And I'm going to make sure that's noted too. The platform is what allows these conversations to happen. So thank you.
Many thanks to Dior Ginyard for joining us here on Sports Spectrum. Give him a follow over on Twitter. You can search last name Ginyard, Dior, Dior, NFLPA's senior player manager, and a great guy who wants to not only share his story to help others, but through that, God has given him a great platform, Dior has, to work with NFL players and impact them and give back and really be an example so that these players can then impact and give back and be an example to others. It's really kind of a cool thing that he's doing. He mentioned this briefly during the interview, but I thought I would mention it a little more. He was named to Forbes's 30 under 30 list in 2018. That's a pretty cool thing when you think about this guy's redemption story to making it to Forbes magazine's 30 under 30 list in 2018. Pretty good stuff there from Dior Ginyard. Many thanks to him for joining us here on Sports Spectrum. Also want to thank our sponsors, Water Mission. You can learn how they are doing great work in fighting the global water crisis by going to watermission.org. And of course, Compassion International. Compassion doing great work releasing children from poverty in Jesus' name. Check out compassion.com/sports spectrum to learn more about how you can release a child from poverty today. Many thanks to you for listening. Check out our social media pages and website as well. Of course, on social media, we're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Just search Sports Spectrum and you'll find us there. And then our website is sportspectrum.com, where sports and faith connect, the collision of sports and faith, the intersection of sports and faith, over at sportspectrum.com. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time with a brand new episode here on Sports Spectrum's podcast. Have a great rest of your day and stay safe.